gentlemen, shall we start our discussion? Now we are going to complete our discussion, and we are going to invite Mr. Camilleri kindly to present us a global overview on the regional fisheries management organization. Operator, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I hope that everybody had a nice lunch. And I also hope that following the lunch, you will stay awake during this presentation, because it's always difficult to keep awake after a good lunch. First of all, I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Matthew Camilleri. I work for the Fisheries and Aquaculture Department of FAO, and my roles are various. I'm the focal point for the implementation of the Code of Conduct for Responsible Fisheries worldwide, and I'm leading a program on the combating of illegal, unreported and unregulated fishing worldwide. I'm also dealing with a number of regional fishery management organizations and the strengthening of these RFMOs. And I'm also part of the Secretariat for the Committee on Fisheries of FAO. So my portfolio is quite wide. But it's a pleasure for me to be here today to share some thoughts about the role of regional fishery management organizations, and this is the focus of this meeting, to understand the benefits and how to go about setting up such an organization for the Red Sea and Gulf of Aden. Okay, my presentation will focus on the following aspects. First, we'll have a look at the requirements for responsible fisheries management and sustainability. And then we'll look at what the Code of Conduct for Responsible Fisheries says about RFMOs. We'll also look at the options for the establishment of regional fishery bodies. And we'll look at the global achievements of RFMOs in the implementation of the Code of Conduct. And finally, we'll go through a checklist of essentials for the effective management and functioning of RFMOs. So, we all agree, definitely, that the reason for us to be discussing the necessity of setting up a body in the region to oversee fisheries is to achieve long-term sustainability of our living marine resources in the region. They are resources which are shared by the coastal countries, and therefore efforts have to be put together by each of the countries in managing these fisheries. It is not, if it were up to individual countries to manage the fisheries, then we would not be here today. You are here today all together because you have a common goal: to manage the sustainability of your resources in the region together, because you are sharing them. And sound fishery management guarantees the long-term conservation and sustainable use of fisheries resources, maintaining their quality and diversity and availability for present and future generations. How do we achieve long-term sustainability? through actions of states individually or in consultation with national stakeholders, bilateral and multilateral cooperation among states, efforts of regional fishery management organizations, and contributions from relevant governmental and non-governmental organizations. So there are many players in trying to achieve sustainable fisheries. And today we are going to focus on the importance of regional fishery management organizations, which is highlighted in red. Before I go into this next slide, which is a scheme, I followed your interventions very closely this morning, and I cannot stress enough the fact that fisheries management and sustainable fisheries cannot be achieved by a memorandum of understanding alone. Disjointed activities alone, stock assessment alone, organizing a meeting or a workshop. It is not enough just to have data collection, just as an activity alone. It is not enough to just have a legal setup, a legal framework, or a policy. No, all these elements are important, but they are elements that belong to a process. Fisheries management and achieving sustainable fisheries can only be accomplished through a process, which includes a number of elements. This leads me on to this slide, which is an attempt to put together the flow of elements and activities that form part of a responsible fisheries management process. One starts off this process by identifying its objectives. Objective to increase production, for example, in a sustainable way. And taking into consideration certain characteristics of the region. You have been mentioning this morning that this region is particular because it has coral reefs. One needs to take into consideration socio-economic factors, the kind of fishing gear that is being used, the biological characteristics of the resources that are being exploited. So many considerations need to be taken into perspective, along with the objectives. When those are clear, then you can start formulating a fisheries policy and a legislative framework that encompasses and takes into consideration those objectives and considerations, in line with international law or regional law and policy. With that in place, you move on to formulating management plans, which should be multidisciplinary in nature with stakeholder participation. On the basis of those management plans, you adopt regulations, which could be technical measures, catch control, fishing capacity control, access control, port state measures, post-harvest measures. And then one implements these regulations through effective legal, administrative, and institutional structures, management actions, monitoring, control, and surveillance to make sure that the regulations are being followed. and management in partnership with stakeholders. And there should be a review process to make sure that all this is functioning well, and maybe you need to adjust certain regulations or even change your management plan. And it goes on. So fisheries management, coming back to my initial statement, is about a process, not just an exercise, stock assessment exercise. No, it is a stock assessment exercise is only one part of the whole process. Central to all this is the participation of stakeholders in every part of that process. The need for data was stressed this morning. The fact that apparently there is a lack of data in the region for various reasons. And besides data collection, you need to have research and analysis of the data that is collected. And all this information then, multidisciplinary information on the environment, on the stocks, socioeconomic information, feeds into every single part of that regional fishery management process. In implementing the management plan and in conducting monitoring, control, surveillance, you also collect information that goes into the information hub at the center of all this. This process could apply at national level, but it definitely applies at regional level. And this is what we are trying to achieve. We are not trying to achieve here just a study or collaboration or holding a meeting discussing, I don't know, the impacts of destructive fishing gears. All these things are good, but they are only part of the jigsaw puzzle. And this is a process, and it is a cycle which has to continue. IUU fishing destroys this cycle and has to be overcome. But something positive that makes this cycle work is good governance. And what can give good governance to this process at regional level? A regional fishery management organization. So, thank you for being patient with me to just display this process before going into some details on regional fishery management organizations or regional fishery bodies in general, because I wanted to focus on what we are trying to achieve. A regional fishery body, however it is established, needs to take care of this cycle. It is not there just to host a meeting amongst friends to discuss the impacts of climate change on coral reefs or holding a training workshop. It is about a process. And to tie this process together, we need good governance, and governance at regional level is established, could be established through a regional fishery body. So kindly keep this in focus. Now, what does the FAO Code of Conduct for Responsible Fisheries say about RFMOs? I'm sure you are all familiar with the Code of Conduct for Responsible Fisheries. It is considered to be the reference document for achieving sustainable fisheries. It is almost 20 years old, but still valid till today. It is the document that has been translated into most languages in FAO, not only in fisheries, in all sectors. It is the most widely translated document. What does it say about RFMO? It says a lot. And reference to RFMOs is found throughout the code. It calls on RFMOs to foster cooperation among states to ensure effective conservation and management of living aquatic resources. You have all agreed this morning that cooperation is important, and this is highlighted in the code, not alone, but not enough to have cooperation. There are many other things, and we'll see. Apply a precautionary approach widely to conservation, management, and exploitation of living aquatic resources in order to protect them and preserve them, and the aquatic environment. The excuse of not having information and data does not preclude you from taking a decision, a management decision, using the precautionary approach. So lack of information and lack of data does not keep you back from taking a step forward. Of course, getting better information will help you take better decisions. Develop transparent mechanisms for fisheries management and related decision-making processes. Involve stakeholders, be transparent, have criteria for your decisions. Adopt appropriate measures based on the best scientific evidence to maintain or restore stocks at levels capable of producing maximum sustainable yield. Promote and implement effective, regionally agreed fisheries monitoring, control and surveillance and law enforcement measures, including observer programs, inspection schemes and vessel monitoring systems. Determine stock-specific target and limit reference points and take action if they are being approached or exceeded. Promote the development and use of selective, environmentally safe and cost-effective gear and techniques. Introduce measures for depleted resources and those resources threatened with depletion that facilitate the sustained recovery of such stocks. Ensure that the resources and habitats critical to the well-being of such resources which have been adversely affected by fishing or other human activities are restored. Promote compatibility of conservation and management measures taken by concerned states to manage the transboundary fish stocks, straggling fish stocks and highly migratory fish stocks. And foster and promote international cooperation and coordination in information gathering and exchange, fisheries research, management and development. So you can see that the code puts a lot of responsibility on regional fishery management organizations and regional bodies. We'll see the difference between those in a while. And therefore, this is why we are here today, because all these elements, all these requirements, all these responsibilities need to be taken on board by whatever body you decide that you want to establish in the region. Dr. Manini this morning already showed this, this map. You can see that the whole world has a number of regional fishery bodies, and they cover various regions. And FAO's belief is that the implementation of international instruments to achieve responsible fisheries can be achieved through the role of regional fishery bodies. So we really put a lot of importance on the proper functioning, effective functioning of RFBs throughout the world. Coming to the options for the establishment of regional fishery bodies. First of all, we need to make a distinction between the type of mandate. There's the advisory mandate, where a regional fishery body, which is made up of countries, representatives of countries, provide advice and decisions or coordinating mechanisms related to the management of fisheries and aquaculture, because we should also take aquaculture into consideration, that are not binding on their members. So it is just recommendations and advice which members are encouraged to take on board without any binding obligation. Then there's the management mandate, where a regional fishery body may have a mandate to adopt fisheries and aquaculture conservation and management measures that are binding on its members. What does binding really mean? You have an international, under international law, you are obliged to implement that decision that has been taken by the regional fishery body. And you are expected as a country to reflect that obligation in your national laws. So it is something more serious, that you need to reflect it both legally and implement it in practice. And these are called regional fishery management organizations. So this is the difference between an RFB with an advisory role and an RFMO with a management and one which takes binding decisions. Some reference was made this morning, and I've seen also in your documents, to a regional fisheries arrangement. Sometimes you see RFMO/A, so Regional Fishery Management Organization or arrangement. An arrangement is not really a body which is constituted by members. It does not operate under a governing body of member states and does not have a secretariat. It is more or less like the establishment of a memorandum of understanding, or an agreement that 2 or more countries can take between them by signing an agreement on a certain issue. So that is an arrangement, not a body where you have members constituting this governing body. So I needed to make that distinction. A body and an arrangement are not the same thing. So that's the type of mandate, advisory as opposed to management. Now we go to the institutional categories of RFBs. So it applies to both advisory and management. Currently there are RFBs which are established under FAO's constitution. They are part of FAO, either established under Article 6 of the FAO constitution, and these have an advisory mandate and fully dependent on FAO, with support from the regular program of FAO, fully supported. Or Article 14, established under Article 14 of the FAO Constitution, and these have a management mandate and are more autonomous. There is an autonomous budget set up, members of such RFBs pay a contribution towards the budget of the RFB, and they are more autonomous, but still under FAO and still with support from FAO. Those of you who are familiar with RECOFI, for example, or GFCM, or IOTC, these are Article 14 bodies with an autonomous budget, but still benefiting from the support and framework of FAO. We then have another category, and these are RFBs which are established outside the FAO framework, but with FAO depository functions. Those of you who are familiar with ICCAT, for example, the International Commission for the Conservation of Atlantic Tunas, this is a non-FAO regional fishery management organization, but the agreement of ICCAT was deposited with the Director General of FAO. So any changes or any regulations that ICAT set have to be informed, have to be deposited with the Director General of FAO, and it is the Director General of FAO who then informs the members of such changes. It is not only a post box, if I could call it that way, but there is a special working relationship that is set up between such an RFB and FAO through a formal agreement, which is signed by the RFB and FAO. And one such agreement exists for ICAT, just to keep on with this example, whereby the role of FAO and the type of contribution to this RFB is specified black on white. Amongst other things, FAO participates fully in meetings of ICAT, for example, not only as an observer, but as a formal participant. The third group are those RFBs which are established outside FAO's framework. No depository functions at all, it's just outside FAO's framework. However, FAO closely monitors and collaborates with such RFBs. Sometimes there are projects, for example, in which FAO gets involved, where RFBs are also involved. We have close ties with almost all RFBs, especially the ones with the management mandate. So the previous slide and this slide should, I hope, guide you in your deliberations on the way forward for the setting up of a regional body for this region. Remember, it's management or advisory, and then you have these three different options. Looking at some global achievements of RFMOs in the implementation of the code, we saw earlier on the obligations which the code sets for RFBs. And we do have a record of achievements. This is information that we have collected through questionnaires that are sent out periodically by FAO, so we are in touch with what RFBs are doing throughout the globe. RFMOs have established measures, amongst others, to prohibit the destructive fishing methods and practices, protect endangered species, ensure that the level of fishing is commensurate with the state of fisheries resources, allow depleted stocks to recover, improve selectivity of fishing gear, limit bycatch and discards, and address bycatch management. Reliable stock status estimates are available for about 70% of the stocks managed by RFMOs. Where reference points have been exceeded, steps have been taken by RFMOs to limit fishing effort, carry out research, adjust fishing capacity, strengthen monitoring control surveillance, close fisheries. The precautionary approach in fisheries management is being applied widely by RFMOs. And RFMO fishery management processes are supported by historical data most of the time, and routinely collected data, including from logbooks, landings, vessel license registers. RFMOs are implementing MCS measures, including the use of vessel monitoring systems, satellite vessel monitoring systems. And they are assisting in the implementation of international plans of action. Under the Code of Conduct, there are 4 international plans of action which have been set up on the conservation of sharks and seabirds, fishing capacity, and illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing. And FAO believes that RFMOs are doing sterling work in the implementation of these IPOAs. So these are some of the things that eventually a regional body in this region could also join in doing. And there are many role model RFMOs that could be used for this region. In conclusion, I'd just like to have a list of essentials for the effective functioning of RFMOs. It would be a pity, a waste of time, a waste of resources to just set up a regional body that will not function well. Unfortunately, with the more than 50 regional fishery bodies established around the world, some are not functioning at all, some are struggling to function, and others are functioning well, and others are always aspiring to do better. So of course, you go into different categories. You are at a stage where your decisions now should take you to establishing a regional fishery body under whichever structure you deem fit to function. You don't want to set up something that will not function. So I've put a list here together for you to use perhaps as a checklist in formulating a future RFB for the region. One needs to have an appropriate institutional structure and sufficient financial and human resources for the efficient and effective functioning of the organization. You need to have, besides the governing body with the representatives of the countries, committees set up under this RFB to take care of the different aspects of fisheries management. In the GFCM, for example, there is quite a heavy structure where you have scientific committees for fisheries and one for aquaculture, and then you have subcommittees, one dealing with environment, another with socioeconomics, another with stock assessment, and the other one on environment, on statistics. So depending on the needs of the region, you need to really set up a good institutional structure for this RFB. It's not a question of just holding a meeting once a year to discuss aspects related to fisheries. The work of an RFB is every day, continuous throughout the year. Then, of course, to achieve this, you need to have sufficient financial and human resources to have that whole process function, with a secretariat in place, with national focal points and scientists. So this really needs to be carefully taken into consideration. An effective RFB would have a robust analytical, advisory and decision-making process, including the involvement of stakeholders. This was also mentioned this morning, the importance of bringing the industry on board in taking decisions. Very important. You can have all the money in the world poured into an RFB, but if there is no political will from the contracting parties, from the members, to implement the agreed measures, then all will fail. It is no use making rules to break them. So there must be a commitment, a political commitment beforehand. There must be appropriate follow-up to the decisions. You don't just decide on something, you decide to, I don't know, increase the mesh size of a certain net that is being used. But if there's no follow-up, if countries do not take steps to make this regulation, to enforce this regulation at national level, and the RFB should follow up on the progress being made by its members, then it would fail. So there's an important need for follow-up. It's also important to apply appropriate sanctions, penalties, and corrective mechanisms in response to lack of compliance. If you are taking the decision together and you have 9 countries who are following the decision, but one country is not, then that one country is undermining all the good work that is being done. So there must be some mechanism to have appropriate sanctions or penalties and corrective mechanisms. It is very important to have cooperation among the contracting parties and capacity building mechanisms to support developing countries. Very often in regional fishery management organizations, you have members which are not at the same level of know-how and resources. And therefore there must be cooperation between those contracting parties who are more able and who have more resources, so that this country at a higher level can support another country at a lower level to bring it up to the same level and work together. It is very important. So it's what we call in FAO South cooperation as well. And of course some external input from projects, perhaps, capacity development projects, in which FAO does a lot of work to support the developing countries. It is important that there's availability of national expertise and resources for data collection, research, and assessment of stock status. If we're managing a common stock and data collection, fisheries data collection is only coming from part of the members, then you have a hole in your information. It is important that data is collected by all partners and put into the same pot for a complete assessment to be carried out. Strong national and regional governance frameworks. At national level, there must be cooperation and coherence between environment ministries and fisheries ministries. They cannot be working in opposite directions. They have to be going towards the same goal. And likewise, at regional level, there are environmental entities, governing entities, and there are fisheries governance entities. And they need to work together at regional level to achieve the same goal. Otherwise, they will be in conflict, and conflict is no good for any party. Appropriate and effective monitoring, control and surveillance schemes and reporting mechanisms. There are various ways on how MCS can be implemented. You can agree to having a minimum catch reporting scheme, for example, catch documentation scheme, logbooks. Or you can go to higher levels where you have a regional scheme to monitor vessels through satellite. But it depends on the necessities of the region. Of course, taking it step by step. There's also a need for cooperation with non-contracting parties and other entities. In various regions of the world, you've got a number of countries fishing in the same area. Some are members of the regional fishery body, others are not, but they are still fishing in the same area. So you cannot exclude them, and you have to, instead of fighting non-contracting parties, one needs to bring non-contracting parties on board and at least cooperate and have a cooperation relationship. In some RFMOs, in fact, there is the possibility of having cooperating non-contracting party status. So there are the contracting parties, full members, cooperating non-contracting parties, not full members with no voting rights, but they commit themselves to follow any decision that has been taken by the RFMO. So one needs to take that into consideration. And the other entities also refers to other international intergovernmental organizations and non-governmental organizations. And finally, there must be effective schemes in place to combat illegal, unreported and unregulated fishing. Because with all good intentions, with all your good efforts and work, IUU fishing will just simply crack, just like I showed in that scheme. It will just crack the whole system up. And therefore, it is very important to have IUU fishing addressed. So this is the end of my presentation. I'm sorry that I took a bit long and repeated certain things. I repeated because I just wanted to highlight and stress and underline that. But hopefully with this, I know there's a lot of information that you have to take in, but hopefully with this, it will help you during your deliberations and guide you towards the establishment of an entity, a body, that will really and truly address the management of your fisheries resources in the Red Sea and Gulf of Aden, so that you can achieve long-term sustainability of these resources. And we should not forget the role of aquaculture, which is definitely, in this region there are lots of potentials, and my colleague Sandro Lovatelli will definitely be able to give more information on this, because the production of aquaculture is a very significant part of the supply of food to alleviate poverty and to guarantee quality products for future generations. Thank you.
Dr. Kamil Leri, really your presentation can be considered for us as the route map and throw the light on the road which we have to go through. And I think after your presentation, there is many points now become very clear to us. And I think after this presentation, I think our discussion will be different, and we will discuss directly. We will hit the point directly. الدول على البحر الأحمر كلها دول نامية وتعتبر من الدول الفقيرة، ولا بد أن نأخذ هذا في الاعتبار عند وضع المهام وعند وضع الاستراكشر لهذه المنظمة وعند اقتراح التمويل اللازم لأعمال السكرتارية في هذه المنظمة. فما رأي الفاو فيما اقترحته الصومال من مساعدتنا لعمل أو مساعدة فريق من الدول لعمل الاستراكشر الخاص بهذه المنظمة والمهام والموضوعات التي تتولاها.
Thank you, Chair. The FAO, as you have been requesting as a member country of the organization to assist in this process, has already been convening and providing technical support for 2 regional meetings, and has been offering the member countries the range possible option to establish a regional fishery management. For the time being, I'll call it entity, so it can be body, organization, or whatsoever. That will be your regional fishery management organization, not that of the FAO. So it is clearly up to the countries to agree on the objectives why there are certain individuals in an organization, how should work, how should perform, what service should render, how much power should have. This, I'm sorry, but I don't think the organization can replace the member country on this. The moment that your indication based on this simple, initial simple point are clear, then we can all together see what are the instrument, mechanism, a better approach, but it's not the FAO that they can decide that in this region you should have this kind of regional organization. We need, or first we need your clear vision and input on some of the key points.
شكرا دكتور. بطبيعة الحال نحن نعلم أنه هذا الأمر يقع على عاتق الدول هي التي تقترح ماهية المنظمة والدور الذي يجب أن تلعبه ومدى قانونية هذا الدور. ولكن ما كنت أعنيه باستفسار وما تعنيه الصومال من مقترحها هو وجود في حالة ما إذا بدأنا في صياغة هذه الأفكار وجود خبير ذو خلفية أو عمل بمثل هذه المنظمات سوف يساعد هذه الدول في صياغة هذه الأفكار الصياغة الصحيحة. السعودية تفضل.
أرى أنه مقترح جيد، لكن دعونا نفكر في كلام الدكتور منيني، وأعلم ذلك أي هيئات إقليمية الدول تعتبر هي أكثر قربا للتهديدات الموجودة وكذلك الطموحات والآمال اللي ممكن أن تعملها الدولة. الهيئة الإقليمية المقترحة والكيان اللي إلى الآن لم يولد، يعني كيان نسميه انتيتي كيان مقترحي، قد إذا كان يرقى إلى مستوى مقترح أن يكون فريق مصغر من دولتين أو 3 دول على الأكثر لصياغة الرؤية والأهداف، الفيجن والرؤية والأهداف، وكذلك آلية الميكانيزم، آلية العمل، ومن ثم مناقشتها مع الفاو، وبعد ذلك وضع التصور بشكل واضح.
نشكر السعودية على هذا الاقتراح البناء، وأعتقد أنه ممكننا أن نختار مجموعة من بيننا من بين الدول الأعضاء من ترشحونهم للبدء في هذا العمل، وبعد الانتهاء منه ممكن أن نطلع عليه عدة منظمات ومنها الفاو إذا من باب الاستشارة ليس إلا. أنا أعتقد أن هذا الاقتراح اقتراح وجيه جدا جدا، وأن يكون هناك مجموعة عمل تبدأ في العمل فعليا بوضع التصور الكامل ويعرض على الدول ويتم تنفيذه، وبعد ذلك نبدأ في مرحلة التنفيذ. شكرا. مندوب المحترم، هذا هو فعلا القصد. هو في البداية ما اقترحناه هو تشكيل مجموعة العمل هذه أو تشكيل اللجنة هذه، أما متى تعمل وما المدة التي سوف تستغرقها لإنجاز هذا العمل فلم نتطرق إلى هذا الموضوع الآن. بالنسبة لمداخلة الدكتور أحمد، أعتقد أن مذكرة التفاهم يعني بداية جيدة، أرى أننا سنبني عليها. مذكرة التفاهم معنية بالموضوع بعدة موضوعات، لكنها خلت من الالتزامات لدول الأعضاء، الشروط العضوية، خلت عن المقر الذي يمكن أن يستضيف في هذه الكوميشن أو أيا كان اسمها هذا الكيان، وكذلك خلت من السكرتير أو الستراكشر لهذه المنظمة. كل هذه الأمور لابد من مناقشتها بناء على مذكرة التفاهم التي تم إنجازها في السابق. شكرا.
Raised by the distinguished delegate from Yemen, it's it's relevant because I can understand that it may be difficult to decide. In fact, you're not asked, it's my understanding, to take any final decision. You're asking your technical capacity, being all together, to identify what you consider the most relevant function of a secretariat, if you think you need to have a secretariat, the objective of the regional fishery entity, whatever it will be. And just to make a little bit of history, the creation of this regional fishery management entity was requested by the member countries, by your country, not by the FAO. And the FAO has been in 2009 and 10 fielding a mission to each member, including Yemen, to meet with high-level national authorities to have the views of each country about the establishment of a regional fishery entity. And what we got from all countries was, yes, we do need, we want to have it, we don't know yet how, please facilitate, bring us together to discuss, which is basically what we are doing now and what we did in the past.
شكرا دكتور منيني. أنا أيضا أريد أن أضيف هنا أن هناك بعض النقاط التي من الصعب أن نناقشها خلال اليوم وغدا، وهو موضوع ترتيبات التمويل لمثل هذا الكيان، لأننا لن نمول سكرتاريا فقط، ولكن سنمول السكرتاريا والأنشطة التي ستتولاها هذه المنظمة، هذا التمويل لا يمكن الحديث عنه الآن إلا بعد الوقوف على هذه الأنشطة التي ستقوم بها المنظمة وهذه الأوبجكتيفز أو هذه المهام التي ستتولاها. عند معرفتنا لهذه المهام وتحديدها يمكن أن نتخيل ما هو التمويل المطلوب لإنجاز هذه المهام. فهذا البند وهو بند التمويل يمكن أن نرجئه الآن، ولكننا يمكن الآن أن نتناول إمكانية استضافة مثل هذا الكيان في أي دولة من الدول المطلة على البحر الأحمر. ونحن في مصر open-minded، إذا كان المقر في القاهرة، في السعودية، في إريتريا، في اليمن، في جيبوتي، أي دولة تريد أن تستضيف مثل هذا المقر يسعدنا بالطبع أن يكون في القاهرة، ولكن إذا كان هناك قبول بأن يكون في دولة أخرى فليس لدينا أي تحفظ أو مانع من هذا الأمر. السودان، تفضل.
مثل هذه التنظيمات او المؤسسات او المفوضيات تشكل لها لجنة فنية في الاول، يعني عشان نحن نقدر نوصل لزيرو درافت. بعد ذاك الناس بتتناقش عليهم على مستوى الدول. يعني decision is not our decision. just to go for it from right now. لكن مهمتنا، وانا بمشي الحقيقه مع الاخوه في اليمن بانه it needs time، يعني الحاجات دي بتاخذ وقت، لكن لازم عشان كل مره بنقول هي بتاخذ وقت لازم يكون عندنا درافت نعمله نحن وناخذ فيه النظره التكنيكال ناخذها. بعدين بيكون في بعض مرات بعض القرارات اللي بتحتاج لمشاوره من الدول، من دولنا يعني عموما ده بيحصل. فبنهاية يومنا أو بنهاية اجتماعنا أنا أتوقع أن نصل لدرافت لمسودة لهذه المنظومة التي يعني نحن نتوقع أنها هي أساسا كما قال الأخ ممثلي الفرع بأنها initiation من الدول، لأن احنا عايزين نعمل منظومة تعاون ما نسميها ما نسميها، لكن لما نوضع شيء نتفق عليه تكنيكالي كويس وبعد الاقتراحات، وهذه الاقتراحات بعدين بترجع للدول، وزي ما عارفين كلنا انه بتخضع لقرارات يمكن على مستوى ليفل عالي شويه ومثلا فيها الخارجيات وليس الزراعه وليس الاسماك وليس زي ما عارفين هذه الاشياء يعني. وبعد ذلك بتخش فيها الدوله بتشوف الصيغه القانونيه برضه يعني كيف برضه والاقتراحات دي. لكن دائما نحن في اجتماعاتنا صحيح انه في ناس ديسيجن ميكرز وسطنا هنا، لكن برضه يكون في مشاوره مع الدول، لانه هي في الاخر تكتل بتاع الدول المطله على البحر الاحمر وخليج عدن، وكلهم مع بعضهم عايزين يعملوا منظومه تعاون، ودي غراره بتلقاه بعض المرات في منظومه. لا استبعد اطلاقا انه يكون في انبوتس من الفاو منظمه الزراعه والاغذيه، لانها هي المنظمه اللي كل الناس دي منضوين تحتها عضويتها يعني. فلازم يكون في اورجنايزنج بودي وفاسيليتيتنج يعني في شغله يكون من المنظمه الاقليميه اللي بتضمنا كلنا، ويكون في الانبوتس بتاعتها، ويكون في الفينجرز بريس بتاعتها، في بصماتها بتصهر في هذه الاشياء من ناحيه بتاعت هاو تو بوز تمبلت والليجل فريم ورك بتاع المنظم العمل هذا يعني بتكوين بمنظومته اللي عايزينها. لكن عشان الاجتماع برضه يكون فروتفول انا بفتكر نحن نبدا ما دام جينا هنا في الداخل كل الشغلات هي مشوره اقليميه حول التعاون لاستدامه الموارد دي، وعشان نستديم نحن لازم يكون عندنا يعني ريجنال بودي، وده متفقين عليه، وده كان طلبنا كلنا كممبر ستيتس قالوا لازم نعمله. لازم نطلع بحاجه اقل شيء انا اتوقع انه يكون عندنا زيرو درافت يطلع من هذا الاجتماع وتبي بروسيس ليتر ويتوزع للناس يتناقشوا فيه يشوفوا الليجل كاباسيتي بتاعت الناس مع بعضها فيه وشنو، وده بيكون بيحتاج برضه لمفاهمات على مستوى اقول وزاري، على مستوى سيادي، نقول على مستوى سيادي يعني بانه اين تكون دوله المغرب؟ اين يكون التمويل؟ لانه مرات بيكون في اوبليجيشنز للحاجات دي. المنظومات والتكتلات بيكون فيها الاوبليجيشنز، ما هي بس انت يوسيك الفندنج بودي يديك قروش وتستعمل، مرات بيكون في فيز اشتراكات من الدول، ودي لازم تبقى ابروفد بالدوله يعني ممثل في الخارجيه الماليه بتاعتها وكده. فلكن احنا باي ذا اند اوف ذا داي ونهايه الاجتماع اتوقع انه نكون اقل شيء نرفع لدولنا شيء كده هم يتدارسوه يضيفوا عليه يحذفوا منه يعدلوا فيه، في الاخر يكون في اجتماع وزاري. انا متوقع يكون في اجتماع وزاري في اي وقت من الاوقات للمصابره على المسوده الاتفاقيه كما حصل يعني في الاخوه السعوديه كان عندهم منظومه دول مجلس التعاون الخليجي بيكون على المستوى التكنيكال عشان يمشي على المستوى الوزاري على مجلس التعاون. برضه نحن ده مجلس تعاون بتاع بحر احمر وخليج عدن يكون بنفس البروسيدير ان شاء الله. شكرا جزيلا.
شكرا مندوب السودان الموقر على هذه الرؤيه الواضحه. انا عندما أصرنا كل هذه النقاط ليس بغرض أن نأخذ قرار فيها الآن، ولكن أصرنا جميع النقاط التي يمكن أن تصار حتى عندما يعود كل منا إلى بلده يعلم جيدا أن هذه النقاط سوف تصار ونناقش فيها الجهات المعنية لدى بلده. أننا ناقشنا يمكن أن نناقش المقر سوف نسأل عنه، يمكن أن نناقش التموين سوف، وعندما نجلس مرة أخرى لعمل زيرو درافت يكون لديه على الأقل فكرة واضحة ويكون لديه تفاهمات مع الجهات المعنية في بلده قبل حضوره. نحن نسير اليوم النقاط التي سوف تصار نسيرها مقدما حتى نكون مستعدين للإجابة عليها عند اللزوم، وليس لنأخذ فيها قرار الآن. إذا كنا تحدثنا عن المقر وإذا كنا تحدثنا عن التمويل فهذه الأمور لابد أن تصار، ولذلك كل منا مسؤول عند عودته إلى بلده أن يتفاوض أو يتناقش حول هذه النقاط مع الجهات المعنية والجهات السيادية في بلده ليعود في الأقرب فرصة ممكنة بعد ذلك معه الإجابات ومعه السلطة أو المخول إليه السلطات لاتخاذ قرار. أما إذا في كل اجتماع انتظرنا أن نسيره في الاجتماع الذي يليه ففي هذه الحالة نتقدم. كل أملنا هو أن نبدأ ونسير كل ما يمكن أن يصار من نقاط. شكرا.
شكرا سيادة الرئيس. أنا أحاول أدمج الأفكار حتى أنا أرتب السلة فقط. في البداية أنا أخوي وزميلي من السودان أؤيد في كل ما رأى فيه أن زيرو درافت ضرورية، اتفقنا عليها. النقطة الثانية تكلم الأخ زميلنا من اليمن وأشار إلى أن يوجد صعوبة في أن خلال اليومين هذا نعمل زيرو درافت. بريسكا أشاروا إلى أن الأرضية موجودة وقد تكون أرضية مناسبة. السعودية وضعت أشبه ما يكون في مقترح، يعني إذا رقع كلمة مقترح فإنه يكون فريق عمل من عدة أشخاص، ليس لا حتى يعني تنضج الفكرة. بعد إذا جمعنا الأفكار هذه أعتقد أنها نرجع إلى قضية أن الزيرو درافت يجب أن تخرج عن طريق أرضية بريسكا، تؤخذ أنها كأرضية مناسبة، يحدد لها بعض الأطراف اللي يعملون لها يعني يعملونها يعني عمل ناضج نوعا ما جاهز للعرض مرة أخرى في اجتماع قادم. في نفس الوقت نفس فريق العمل اللي بيكون قادم للاجتماع القادم يكون معه قرارات أقرب ما تكون لتطبيقها على الواقع، وبذلك يكون المقترح خلال الاجتماع فقط قادم لأن الأمور واضحة. فريق عمل مصغر يشوف الأرضية المناسبة من بريسكا، يكون التعاون مع بريسكا لإعداد لا إله إلا الله الدرافت، وإن شاء الله يكون يعني مناسب.
السعودية أعتقد أن معظم النقاط السودان. تفضل.
في الاقتراح بتاع السعودية بتكوين فريق عمل، أنا أفتكر كل الممثلين 7 أو 8 دول، فلازم مجموعة العمل تتكون من نفس الدول، لأنه كل المستوى بتاع الشغل الموجود في كل دولة مختلف عن الثانية. أنا أفتكر 8 دول تقعد كل واحد تضع الحاجات المقترحة من دولتها، بعدين تطلع بدرافت. ممكن احنا بعد ذاك يعني اذا تكونت مجموعه بعد ذاك تجي جروب ثاني مصغر يجي يناقش، ما في مشكله، لكن الان انا افتكر من بكره مفترض كل الدول تكون ممثله في مجموعه عمل.
أعتقد أنه ليس هناك خلاف في وجهات النظر، فمجموعة عمل صغيرة أو مجموعة عمل من 8 أفراد أو من 8 دول ليس عدد كبير أيضا، فتشكيل هذه اللجنة أو هذه المجموعة هو ما نود أن نخلص إليه في اجتماع الغد. لابد أن نحدد من هذه اللجنة تحديدا وما هي المهام التي ستتولاها هذه مجموعة العمل والمدة المتاحة أمامها. لابد أن نحدد مدة معينة تنتهي فيها من إنجاز هذه المهمة، من عمل الاستراكشر لهذا الكيان ومن تحديد الفانكشنز الأوبجكتيفز الاستراكشر، وإذا أمكن التمويل المقترح، وإذا أمكن يعني كل ما يتعلق بهذا الكيان. وأفضل أنا يعني بشكل شخصي ولست كممثل عن مصر، ولكني أنا بشكل شخصي لأن لي فترة طويلة وأنا أعمل مع منظمة GFCM ومنظمة هيئة مصايد البحر المتوسط، أدعو لجنة العمل أو فريق العمل هذا الاطلاع على اتفاقية منظمة GFCM والاطلاع على الاستراكشر أو والمهام التي تتولاها السكرتارية وكل ما يتعلق بالGFCM في دراسة مكتبية يمكن من خلالها تغذية مذكرة التفاهم التي قامت بإعدادها البرسجة مع مجموعة.
بس مذكرة التفاهم أعدتها تاسك فورس نفس الدول، يعني مش بس مذكرة التفاهم. مذكرة التفاهم لم تعدها بس أعدتها الدول.
أشكرك دكتور أحمد على هذا التوضيح. أنا أعلم، ولكن ولكن تحت قيادة برسقة يعني، فإذا برسقة صاحبة الفضل في إنجاز هذه المذكرة، ويمكن عمل الموائمة أو المزج ما بين الموضوعات الموجودة في مذكرة التفاهم من ناحية، ومن ناحية أخرى الهيكل الصلب. هناك أي منظمة عبارة عن هيكل صلب وهيكل وموضوعات وأمور فنية وتقنية. هي عملية المزج بين هذه الأمور الفنية والتقنية والموضوعات والهيكل الصلب أو الاستراكشر من سكرتير ولجان وجهات علمية، وهذا الهيكل الصلب للمنظمة يمكن المزج ما بين هاتين الرؤيتين لإنشاء كيان. وبطبيعة الحال مجموعة العمل هذه لابد أن تأخذ في اعتبارها قدرات الدول الثمانية المحدودة من الناحية المالية ومن الناحية التقنية، فهناك قدرات محدودة ولا نستطيع أن نعمل كوبي مناظر ومشابه لما هو متاح في الGFCM، ولكن يمكن أن نعمل كيان إقليمي مشابه إلى حد كبير للGFCM. شكرا. اوكي دكتور كاميلاري. يجب ان مجموعه العمل عند تشكيلها هي لابد ان تكلف بمهام. هذه المهام ستتضمن تيرم اوف ريفرنس، ستتضمن العمل الذي يجب ان تنجزه مجموعة العمل وطبيعة هذا الكيان، هل هو كيان إرشادي ولا كيان ملزم ولا كل هذا عند تشكيل مجموعة العمل وتحديد التيرم اوف ريفرنس لمجموعة العمل هذه. سوف نضع أمامها هذا العمود الفقري لكي تبدأ أعمالها. لن نترك مجموعة العمل لتبدأ من الصفر، لابد أن نضع لها هذه الضوابط عند تكليفها. وأعتقد أن هذا سوف يكون في الغد لدينا الوقت الكافي ما بين في جدول الأعمال لدينا وقت كافي يمكن أن نناقش تشكيل مجموعة العمل هذه وما هي التيرم اوف ريفرنس وطبيعة هذا الكيان، أن نحدده لمجموعة العمل لتعمل على أساسه. شكرا.